Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey.
We've heard a great deal at this gathering about how eco-innovation is good for business, but is it also a boon for design? Does it lead to better fashions, or better or uglier fashions or sneakers? And how much can design really contribute to advancements in sustainability and society? This is the framework for our today's discussion. And I have two brilliant and articulate men in black to quiz. John Hoke, Chief Design Officer of Nike, and Samuel Ross, founder of the buzzy London label, A Cold Wall. Good to be with you.
The men in black, yes.
Yeah. This is dark navy, by the way, if it doesn't read well. I think you both know that WWD, Women's Wear Daily, where I work, loves breaking and reporting news. So let's start with something really newsy. John, Nike is about to release a circular design guide. So tell us about that and what the impetus was.
Yeah, first off, we are incredibly humbled and honored to be here this whole week. It's my first time, so congratulations on 10 wonderful years. Today, even as we speak, we're launching our circular design guide. And the intent of this is to offer an invitation to all brands in our industry and share with these brands some of the wonderful goals that we've set and learnings that we've created. I like to think of it as an invitation for a dialogue with the creative groups around the world. There are three sort of things that I think about when I consider this effort. One is we are endeavoring to create a common language, and that common language is between designers and developers, material sourcers, factories, et cetera, ways that we can communicate clearly about our efforts around sustainability. And the second is it's a shared commitment. And that shared commitment as designers, I believe, is incredibly important. Design plays a big role in helping to push sustainability to be beyond just function, but of course be functional and sustainable and beautiful simultaneously. And then the last thing that I'm hopeful this invites is a higher ambition for design in the world. And I had a conversation at a dinner earlier this week with a physician sitting next to me, and I was likening this principle to something akin to the Hippocratic Oath, which is this broader context, regardless where you studied medicine, what practice you had. All doctors take a Hippocratic Oath, which helps them do no harm. And I believe that in giving this to the world, open source, by the way, as this talk is going live, if you search NikeCircularDesign.com, you'll be able to access all the information that we have. It's a wonderful workbook. Samuel has seen it and used it. We have trialed this with some of the students at Central St. Martin's.
Indeed, yeah.
And we're seeing some great feedback. I will tell you this, it is a start, and it is by no means finished. This document should be alive and a learning document for, obviously, Nike, but I believe for the larger design community.
Indeed, and to kind of jump in there, what it really does is it takes a real new stance on the philosophy behind design and re-engineering, what designers, regardless of field, whether it be fashion, architecture, product or industrial design, should really be focusing on. It sets a new tone of collaboration, and it takes this concept of design, specifically in fashion, being led from a more dietistic perspective, and it equalizes it, and it creates a more holistic landscape is the easiest way to say. And as John mentioned, this document will be shared and it will be updated. And it's speaking to this idea of cross-pollination and collaboration, not just meaning the result of immediate product, but it also comes down to production facility. It comes down to sourcing of suppliers. It comes down to knowing where to invest regarding companies and mills. And it comes down to looking at, more ethical ways of producing outside of the immediacy of product. It's a real shift and turn and twist in this generation, how we engage and restructure what design really means and re-engineering the purpose of that.
And as a call to action to build on what Samuel is saying, it recognizes that there is no one silver bullet, that this is a portfolio approach that we can take, and designers can access the there are 10 principles, and we won't go through all 10. We might pick a few, but starting with a principle and engaging in that principle, practicing it in the workshop and workbook, I think will advance the knowledge and education. And the hope, I think, with Nike is that we're sharing this information to the world, and the world will come back to us with things that work and things that don't.
Totally.
We can have this be a living document.
Indeed.
And we're learning that even with the work with the students.
Indeed. So I've been recently working, of course, with Nike and also Central St. Martin's. And my experience working with Nike has been one of empowering, actually. As a small company, and Nike being, of course, a huge company, often what we find is we share the same philosophy, but as a smaller company, you don't have the access to the resource or the infrastructure required to bring those changes into place. And my experience really has been about shifting material study and moving it to a more sustainable practice. For example, the sneakers I'm wearing, which were developed with myself, a Cold Wall as a company, and Nike, really are based on a sustainable material. So the upper is produced from Nike Fly Leather, which is really this innovation pioneered by Nike of taking the offcuts of unused leather, compressing them into sheets. And what you find is you have this more durable material which has a longer shelf life. It can sustain a lot more use and wear and damage, and it also is a lot lighter than traditional forms of leather. So what you're seeing is an expansion of material study. And to tie this back to my point, there's a shared philosophy of design from the smaller individuals and companies up to the larger global companies and corporations and operating bodies. So with Central St. Martin's, what I wanted to do was be able to facilitate this conversation between the new forward-thinking minds of the future, the students and creatives and individuals who will shape the next 15 to 20 years of what design and sustainability really looks like. What we ended up doing was giving them allocations of this Nike Fly Leather material and allowing them to reinterpret it and repurpose it and engage with this material. And what's quite brilliant is that the first point of call from the new minds was to really push back and challenge how this material could be used. And myself and Nike were really there to facilitate the students on both the BA and MA course to kind of usher them into a new way of thinking and engaging with this material.
And what's amazing is on this shoe specifically, Nike Grind is a 25-year-old strategy that we've had. So we just had our 25th anniversary where we collect the scrap from the factory floor, break that down into bits, and then put that back into product. So Samuel is wearing a shoe that has a 25-year-old sustainable effort with a brand new effort in fly leather. And while we're on shoes, I happen to wear the Vapor Max shoe, which we're incredibly proud of. A very technical product, but a highly sustainable product. The airbag air sole unit comprised of air uses 50% recycled product going into the bag. The upper is made of a poly blend, and so that poly is pretty incredible, and we are the largest consumer of recycled poly. So together, the combination of this and the fact that it's fly knit means that it's knit exactly to the shape of the foot, so there's 100% yield. So sustainability also can look innovative and look technical and look beautiful. And so the last thing I'll say, because the poly blend that we are saving from landfills, Nike has diverted 6.4 billion plastic bottles from landfills into polyester. And so that recycled polyester makes beautiful products like this, or the upcoming Women's World Cup kits and the NBA kits. So we're converting that trash through alchemy that would go to a landfill into this beautiful product that goes onto the world stage.
Okay, John, my shoes are getting a little jealous. They need a little attention too. No, we'll move on. To move beyond the role of design in society, I know Samuel is sheltering some news, and let's get some more news out. You know, fashion designers have traditionally been kind of on an ivory tower, talking down to consumers. I know this is something you're not fond of, and you're taking some steps to rectify this with your next show. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so before I quickly jump in, because I will touch on that, as you mentioned, you know, the old way of looking at fashion has been more so from the point of, you have your luxury tier of consumer and brand who sit on, let's say, the third floor, and then you have the populace and the everyday people, of which we all are, who tend to be on the ground floor. But I feel that we're moving to a time in terms of information, in terms of communication, where there needs to be a tide and land shift. And my main goal in fashion is to kind of equalize the playing field from a social perspective. So for the next runway show, rather than just having, the specific amount of front row individuals, it will be completely open to the public. And this kind of serves as a place of inspiration for those who may not have access to the same level of, well, not necessarily level of creativity, but the same facets or windows into high fashion. It forms as an equalizer, and a show, of course, is the perfect opportunity to kind of centralize a brand's philosophy. It's a perfect opportunity to kind of inspire and to overlay many themes. So with this show, it will be open to the public as well as the front row guests, as you could expect. And really, it's once again about slowly chipping away and shifting the perspective of how luxury fashion should operate in a modern landscape, and it's about equalizing that. It kind of talks to a bit of my work, which I'll touch on briefly.
Yeah.
The label I founded, and I'm creative director of A Cold War, is really based on socio-geographic happenings within working class communities in melting pot cities such as London and Birmingham and Manchester. And really what my work speaks about is the emotion captured and re-articulated through raw materials such as plaster and concrete, which has actually led me into this sustainability field. So what we're really going to be doing with the show is opening it up to the public and, of course, looking at sustainable materials that can be used to build out the sets and whatnot, and really bridge the gap between fashion and sustainability.
Okay. And so why do you think fashion should be political, and how can that be transmitted by design alone?
Well, I think that, fashion, of course, is a macro speakerphone in global communication currently. Throughout every single social media channel, you have the opportunity to kind of use that speakerphone, and it isn't to be, from a creative standpoint, it should not be poorly used. It needs to be echoed and be quite important what is said. So I've kind of used fashion as a vessel to kind of talk about socio-political issues that often are unheard or not usually articulated through a veneer of creativity, you could say. And for me, it's really the beacon of my work, and that has evolved into material usage, which of course ties back to creating and painting a more holistic portrayal of what fashion can be.
Okay. Well, there's been a lot of talk at this gathering about consumer receptivity. You work in different sort of areas of the market. So start with you, John. In the sport performance field, how important do you think sustainability and eco-innovation is to this audience, and how willing are they to sacrifice performance or design to sustainable goals?
That's a wonderful question. I think that our premise at Nike is that we are seeking to create the highest performance product with the lowest possible impact. And so from our perspective, always serving the athlete and wanting to meet the athlete's ambition with products that help them meet or exceed what they're possible of doing, we don't want to see compromises. And so I think that's where the ingenuity and the innovation and the material selections that we use, and combined with the rigorous product testing, get us to a point where we can have a lower footprint. We can do less is more. Frankly, we can go least is most without any performance compromise. And I think it's important to state that it's not simply the functional piece that the athletes are looking for. Our athletes tell us, and there is psychology that we know a lot about, that the athletes also want to look good. They want to feel when they step on the track or the court or the pitch that they feel like they're ready to compete. They're confident. And when they feel confident, they're going to play well. So I just believe that the urgency now is to have the conversation through the lens of sports and athletics and tell the public that there doesn't have to be a compromise. Okay. Nobody is going to buy ugly function. People want us to take the new materials and a rigorous, conscientious approach we're outlining and deliver even higher performance products, even more beautiful. I know that we can do that.
Okay. Samuel, from your perspective, you're more considered in the streetwear category, and that's where a lot of people buy hype sneakers and put them on a shelf. What's your sense of how important is sustainability to this audience and this generation?
Well, I think, you touched on sneaker culture and the nuances of like hyperconsumption we're kind of facing. I think there's a way to re-engineer how people actually engage with products and what is to be valued on a product. I'll give an example of my own experience working with a product in that field. So I released two sneakers with Nike last year, which were the Vomero 5 Pluses. And what would be expected, of course, is for that sneaker to go out and it enters hype culture and it is shelved. To kind of combat this idea of fast fashion and fast products, I started to look into the nuances of durability and how can a product's life and journey be extended, and how do you overlay emotion into that journey to increase engagement with the product, thus doing away with this concept of buying more for short-term fatigue. So what we actually did with this Vomero 5 was we took this running sneaker. We added an architectural component which was produced from a 3D printed unit, which was formed onto the back of the shoe. But most importantly, we actually took away the UV coatings and the PU coatings from the shoe, and we tiered the resistance throughout the width of the shoe to UV reception, which meant that over time you would get this unique and specific aging approach to the shoe, which would only be engaged via use. So it's about taking an object which is seen to be inanimate and adding life to the process of that product and of that object through use. And what you find is that, I'm going to give a really straightforward example. If you now go on to, say, one of those reselling sites and whatnot, those products for the sneaker of design, the ones that have been aged, are actually more valued than the newer model because they carry emotion, they carry life, and they carry memory. And it kind of taps into this concept of circular design. A product's life doesn't simply end at the moment of purchase, it needs to be 360. And I know John can touch on that a bit more, but from my side, it's really about ensuring that a product is able to reinvent itself through use, and that kind of taps into this new concept of luxury and memory and duration of product being valued.
We were talking backstage that the part of the beauty of that is introducing this human patina, that the use of the product is a diary in essence, and it's communicating in a very human way what's actually happening, and that has an even higher set of values because of the way it's been used.
Totally.
Let's talk a little bit about the different scales of your businesses. So I'll start with you, John. How does working with young creatives like Samuel impact Nike's approach to design and maybe even contribute to its sustainability ambitions?
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky to have on our staff over 1,000 designers, multiple disciplines with studios all over the world, and lots of different backgrounds and very diverse approaches and diverse abilities, etc. So when we get to engage with great collaborators like Samuel and other great collaborators, I think what we learn together is that we meet as equals and we're attacking a problem together as equals. And so meeting Samuel and seeing what his vibe is, what he's interested in, we like to bring our innovative approach, our curiosity approach, and I think together we find new space.
Totally.
And that space is something that we couldn't do alone. And so it goes all the way back to something that Ava said at the beginning. It's finding these agencies where collaboration really helps. It's a 1 + 1 is 3. So even at scale, we tap into these subcultures of designers that are already breaking status quo and pushing out, and we do the same thing. And when we find that like for like point of view, and it becomes personal between the designers, that we feel like we break new ground. We feel like we can be very provocative and push the status quo.
No, totally, and it kind of taps into this idea. These collaborations really start from frank conversation. It's not as simple as, hey, we both admire one another and we want to create something. It really starts from what are the problems that are now, occurring in our industry, and how can we kind of not just resolve those issues, but how do we reshape and remold solutions from those issues. And, as you mentioned earlier, it touches on to looking at reduction of material, for example. So another project and product we worked on was the Air Force High, which released around a year and a half ago. And it came from a design philosophy of reduction to allow, engineering to kind of breathe. And what that actually birthed was less components required to produce a shoe. So it's often these small ripples which then usher into a trend, you could say, which leads into a new phase of design across the commercial landscape. It's really about having those nuances and those moments of intervention, really, that spark change throughout the industry.
And that simple gesture of just forcing us to look differently opens up an entire aperture back in Nike design to question some of the things that you're questioning. I think it's that reciprocity that is just magic.
Okay. Time is racing by like Usain Bolt, so I'm going to focus on two more design-led questions. John, how do you think design education must change in order to prepare future creatives for this new world order?
We had this discussion this morning with a smaller group. I believe that one positive step forward is bringing things like the Guide for Circularity into the general public. I just believe that the future designer will be a designer that is a citizen designer, very thoughtful of the projects that they're designing, the ideas that they bring in the context of the ecologies that they live in. So teaching this idea of sustainability, which used to be a side course, is now embedded in everything, every discipline, because it really matters and it makes a huge difference. And so the academic schools that we work with realize this, and this becomes a central part of the curriculum. The students are asking for it. Their imaginations and their energy times problem solving and aesthetics and building narrative, and also being thoughtful and conscientious and considered with sustainability is going to usher in an entire new aesthetic, an entire new craft. And so I think the schools are very much into things like this. It's our sincere hope that this sparks the dialogue. We all learn together, and that the next generation of designer is even more empowered to have a dramatic impact and make a dent in the problems that we face.
Okay, Samu, we have 1 minute left, but also coming from another field can bring a new perspective and bring disruption. So how has coming to fashion via another discipline, which was graphic and product design, helped or hindered you achieve your design goals for a cold wall?
Well, I think that, coming from graphic design and product design and working commercially before entering into fashion, it's given me the lens of more of a critique in terms of production. And it's really this core understanding that design is servitude and that sustainability is a need that needs to be met, not just from an emotional perspective, but from one that is of the future and to usher in the new, more sustainable way of working. So it's really from the lens of someone who's not designing just for emotional pursuit, but designing to actually encourage us to have these conversations and produce product that can bridge the gap between aesthetic and also need,
Okay.
Which helps to define, I think, a new luxury.
Totally.
Gentlemen, thank you for opening an aperture to the marvels of design and its role in the front of the supply chain and changing the world. So thank you for your insights, and thank you for being a great audience.
Thank you.